Good evening, everyone. It is so wonderful to see you. Please take a moment and put in the chat where you're coming from, your name, and what's your position. I'm so excited to see you here tonight. This is a topic that I am really, really passionate about. So I appreciate you being here. And I just know that how dedicated you are for being here and talking about something that is so important. Burnout really does impact a lot of educators, a lot of leaders. And so for our 30 minutes tonight, I really want to get into this topic, talk about why burnout is so pervasive, why it is so damaging to us, and what we can do to take some concrete steps to really help not only prevent burnout, but to address burnout if you are experiencing that. So again, tell me where you're from. Tell me what level you are, you elementary, middle, high school, district leader, and what your role is. So while you're doing that, I want to jump right into this critical topic. So I think as a function of being educators, being teachers, being leaders, we just work extremely hard. We are people who tend to be of service to others. And so we want to do the very best for everyone around us. We want to serve everyone. We want to pour into everyone. We want to give everyone everything. But the problem with that is if we are giving everyone everything, then we don't have anything left for ourselves. And I know I'm a big time person who used to feel a lot of guilt around taking time off from work or taking a couple of moments to myself to regroup during the school day. But I really think if we're going to have sustainable leadership this year, we're going to have to make changes to the way that we are leading. So that's what I want to focus on tonight. What are some of those shifts that we can make in our daily life, in our work life, in our personal life, so that we can be the best leaders that we can be? So one of the first things about boundaries is that they're often blurred. So that line between work and school oftentimes just comes together. And I know for me, when I was a classroom teacher, I used to grade papers, check my emails right at the dinner table. And then as a leader, oh my goodness, during COVID-19 for many, many years, I was burning myself out. I would come into my guest room in the house, lock myself in there from sun up to sundown and just work. And I know I wasn't alone in doing that. And at the moment, I didn't understand how damaging that was until I got to a point where my mental health was not in a great place, where my physical health was not in a very good place. And so I am very open and transparent with sharing with people that I am someone who entered therapy for the first time as a result of feeling burned out. And I really like to put a plug in for therapy because it was a powerful resource for me to use. And actually, it was a free resource from my district. So I want to start off this conversation on a little bit of a serious note, saying that if you or someone that you know is struggling with their mental health as a result of overworking and overextending themselves, please follow up with your district. It was a wellness. We could go through employee resources in our district, and there were 6 free sessions that I was able to take advantage of, and they were life-changing. So I really want to take the stigma away from therapy that sometimes we feel, but it was so important for me to have an opportunity to talk to someone else who wasn't in education, who just was a person who had strategies and reflective questions. That was very helpful. So I do want to take that moment to pause and say, if this year you are in a position, there's no shame in reaching out for help through your district or beyond. So I want to talk a little bit more about, boundaries and why it's so important, because stress really impacts everything. I like to think of it from a top-down perspective. So if we as leaders are in our buildings and we are stressed out, we're exhausted, it really has a trickle-down effect on everyone around us in our school building. For instance, I know when I was burned out, I had a terrible time making decisions. That was because number one, I wasn't eating. Number two, I wasn't getting any sleep. And so I truly was existing on fumes. And when leaders are existing on fumes, nothing good comes out of that. So I want us to really think about, this reflection question. What was the most overwhelming time that you felt last year? Or what was the situation that really pushed you to that exhaustion level? I want you to put it in the chat because I think it's important not only to recognize a time when we are feeling burned out, but also thinking ahead preventatively that if you know you are burning out in the fall when there's holidays, there's Thanksgiving, there's Halloween, there's all these different things that are going on. There's Eid, there's several holidays, but there's also report cards, there's parent teacher conferences. That's a very stressful time. If you know that that's a stressful time for you and you name that, that means you can put some strategies preventatively in place for the coming year that might help you. So that's what I really want to talk about tonight. First, we have to recognize what was an area where we felt the most stress, and then what are some things that we can do to help address some of those stressors. And I want to put a plug in for our book. This is a book that Brad Johnson and I wrote. It's called Relational Intelligence, the Key Factor to Exceptional School Leadership. We have an entire chapter that is dedicated to what I'm talking about tonight, boundaries. And it's called Boundaries for Balance. And it's chapter 9, and it is absolutely incredible. We have lots of strategies. Some I'll share tonight, but the majority of them are going to be in the book. So I do encourage you to go on Amazon and pick up a copy of Relational Intelligence if you haven't already. So let's talk about some specific strategies that we can use for burnout. So the first thing I want you to think about is, how are you using your calendar? Are you being intentional with the way that you are using your time? And we know time is the greatest commodity that we have. As leaders, as teachers, as educators, we cannot get time back. We all have the same amount of time every day, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And what we do with that time really makes a difference in the quality of our life. So one of the things that I first want to start off by talking about is, how are we using our calendar to our advantage? How are we using that time intentionally? So the first strategy I'm going to share with you is to block off time on your calendar to do the essential things that you need to do while you are on the clock at work. Here's an example, a very simple one. If I'm doing a 60-minute observation for ELA, for math, in a teacher's classroom, science, social studies, I used to block off 60 minutes. And then I would block off another 60 minutes for a second observation in another class. Then I would block off another 60 minutes and I would go down the hallway to another class and I do another 60 minutes and another one. So I was going back to back to back with my observations. And even though I was, in theory, getting 4 observations done in one day, which was too much, frankly, I actually was not allowing the write-up time. That time of writing up observations takes time. So what I learned to do was, instead of going back to back to back to back with my classroom observations, I started blocking off 90 minutes of time. So for the 60 minutes, for the first part of the 60 minutes, I was in the classroom writing. I was writing up my observations. But for the next 30 minutes, I stayed in the classroom and finished writing the evaluation. And that made such a difference in my time personally, because when I was doing 4 observations in a row, even though on paper I was getting them accomplished, I actually had to come home and write them all up. So I was sitting in front of a TV writing them up. I was locked away in the room writing them up on my personal time. And that's not something that I do anymore. So I want to encourage you to block off a little bit more time on your calendar for observations, so you have time to do them when you're in the actual classroom. And I found there's lots of benefits for doing that. Number one, you get to see more of the instruction. You get to see more of the students learning, and you get to see transitions from subject to subject. So you're in the classroom, you're in the environment. Usually I like to step in and talk with students during that time and then get back to writing. So I just when you're in the classroom a little longer, you have more information. So I want you to try that if you haven't already. Another thing that I do during the day is I will block off 30 minutes in the morning and in the afternoon to check emails. Now, we all know it is incredibly busy throughout the day. So if I give myself a 30-minute block, I can start to take off the emails, because if I don't do that, what will happen is I will have 100 emails by the end of the day. But if I block off an AM and a PM time to check them, then that helps me to get a start on some of those. Another thing I want to share with you is, being present in your hallways. That's another good way to use your time wisely, because a lot of times teachers will come up to you with requests right in that moment and you're able to respond to them, and that saves you emails. So I definitely encourage you to try to block off time for some of those tasks so you do not end up having to do them on your personal time. And finally, I'm going to suggest that you not only block off time on your work calendar for work-related tasks, but I want you to think about how you can block off calendars at home for your personal time. So this is something that I do. I block off calendar time for date nights. I block off calendar times to exercise. I block off times to take a walk. So I want you to think about how you're also prioritizing family and friend times on your personal calendars. Because just like with work, if it's not time allocated, time gets away from us. So what we're doing is we're prioritizing and using our calendar to make sure we're putting what is important and essential as a part of our day. So I want you to think about those strategies and try to use your calendar in a more intentional way. Next, this one is really, really important, and it's about communicating expectations, communicating when people can expect to hear from you. This is something that I learned to do a couple years ago, definitely during COVID-19, when I was coming out of the burnout and doing a better job of establishing boundaries. One of the boundaries that I talked with our staff about in a full staff meeting was about, hey, I've been really burned out. I don't know if you all could tell or not, but I am not in a position where I can keep up the pace that I've been keeping up, because I was working around the clock. I truly was. So one of the things that I talked about with the staff was, if something is sent to me in an email after hours and it is work related and it's not an emergency, you will not get a response until the next day. And that became something that was really powerful for our staff, because what I shared with them was the reason why I'm not going to respond is because that's my time with my family. And that's important time that I honor. And that was a boundary I had never established before. But let me tell you, it made a huge difference, not only in my personal life, but also in the lives of the staff. Because after I said, don't feel obligated to send me the email, but if you do, you'll hear from me in the next day, then that gave permission for the staff to do the same with each other. Because we know, we always have group chats. We had teams who were working over dinner time. We had teams who were going into the night. What's the lesson for tomorrow? Just really disrupting some of that time with our families. And so when I said to the staff, this is a new boundary I want to put in place for all of us, the number of people who sent me text messages in that moment and just said, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it and I want to try it too. So as leaders, when we give ourselves permission to have those boundaries, we're also giving permission to our staff to have a healthier work balance. And that is critically important right now, especially given all the challenges that we have. So definitely think about how you can communicate those. Even last week, so just last week, our staff returned, which was an amazing day, high energy. We're getting ready for the school year. One of the first things that I said to the staff was that my kids are getting ready to enter high school and our schedule is going to change. And that means there's going to be times when I'm available and times when I'm unavailable. And the same thing happened. Several staff members said, thank you so much for saying that. I'm a high school mom, or I was a high school mom, and I know how your schedule is going to be impacted, but I appreciate you letting us know. So again, let's be communicative. Let's tell people when we are available and when we're not. That way everyone understands, and let's tell them why. So definitely communicate. The third thing I want to talk about is saying no gracefully. I am someone who definitely has had problems in the past saying no. If you offered me an opportunity, 100% of the time, I was taking it. But there was a problem with that. The more opportunities that I took on, the less effective I was at them. Why? Because I could not dedicate the time to each of them that they deserved. So, one of the things that I talk about now with leaders all across the country is about how you can say no and get over the guilt of saying no, and how you can still hold a positive relationship with someone, even if you decline an offer or a request. And so, one of the things I want to think about, and for you to think about, is how can you respond to people in a way where you're not able to commit to what they're asking you to do, but you still hold the relationship. So here's an example. Let's say someone asks you to volunteer your time after school hours to work on a committee. This happens a lot to educators. And it might be something you really care about. And if it is something you care about and you're willing to give your time up, then it should be a yes. But if it's something that you are not willing to give your time up, or you know your family is going to need you at that time, what I have said is language like, thank you so much for considering me for this opportunity. I know how important this is, but unfortunately, I'm not able to commit my time to do this in the way that it deserves. No one's going to argue with you if you say that. Here's another way to say no. I really appreciate you thinking of me, but after school hours is time I need to spend with my family. No one's going to argue with you on that. They're going to understand. So it's not a flat no. It is a no, and then you're giving a reason why, or sometimes you don't have to give a reason why, but I like to give a reason why. Another thing that you can say is, no, but I have someone who may be excellent in this. Another choice, would you like me to reach out to that person to see if they are interested in that? So there are many ways that you can still respectfully decline without feeling guilty. So I want to hear from the comments. What are some times where you may have been requested, but you said no for the first time? What are some examples of that where you've been, asked to do something, but you respectfully decline and you're okay? Because I want people to know and understand that this happens every single day, and people will always find someone else. That's my experience. They'll always find someone else to fill what they're asking for. So another strategy, now we're on the fourth strategy, is around making sure you have a consistent routine at the end of your school day. This one is really important. And I thought a lot about, how do I end my school day? And so usually when our students dismiss right around 4:15, we always stay a little bit later to make sure that the students on buses get home before we dismiss for the day as a leadership team. And so my routine is pretty clear. I pack up my bags, and then I will write a to-do list and leave it for myself in the morning. I usually put on a sticky note. Some people have the Notes app and they'll put it there. Some people have it on their desktop and do it electronically. But for me, a part of my routine is physically packing up and then writing a list of all the things that need to be done for the next day. And here's the deal. In the past, I would take that to-do list home and then I would start working on the task. I don't do that anymore because the tasks are still going to be there waiting for me in the morning. And that's what I want people to understand. There is not enough hours in the day for an educator to complete everything. It just doesn't happen. It's the nature of our jobs. So what we want to do is, make sure we have the to-do list there, but it doesn't mean we're doing it on our personal time. It means we're going to do it on the next day. And then there are some tasks that I didn't get to the next day. I just cross off, add to the list, and keep going. It is a never-ending list, but it's a good visual to say that I'm going to write down what I have to do, but I'm leaving it at school. Again, we have to get over that guilt, because when you say no to things, you are making time to say yes to things that truly matter, like your family, your friends, your hobbies, and the things that you enjoy doing. Okay. And the next one I want to share, this is our fifth strategy, is to delegate and share leadership. I know I wouldn't be where I was today if, as a teacher, I wasn't given opportunities to lead and take on tasks. And so I'm someone as a principal who truly believes that if we're going to develop people and help them get to their next level, we have to give people opportunities. As leaders, we cannot do everything. In fact, there are people in our buildings who can do things better than we can. So why should we be responsible for doing everything? We need to give people opportunities to share their strengths with our entire school community. So I want you to think about the people in your building. Who are the people who have amazing strengths, and how can we utilize them in a way that benefits all of our students, all of our staff, and all of our families? I was new to my school last year, and that's one of the things that I asked. What do you love to do? I would ask people, what do you like to do? What do you want to do? And then find opportunities to connect people to those opportunities. It makes people feel valued. It makes people feel connected when we're giving them something and we're trusting them to do something that they do well. So thinking about how we can utilize the resources in our buildings, that is something that is critically important now more than ever, because there are budget cuts, there are position cuts, and we have to be very creative as leaders and teachers for how we are utilizing the people who we already have. So be thinking about how we can delegate in an effective way. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left, so I want to give a recap of those strategies for you. The first one was blocking off and using your calendar in a very strategic way, personally and professionally. The second one was communicating expectations for how and when we will be responding to people. Next, saying no gracefully. And we know we can hold a relationship and still show respect to people without guilt. The fourth one was creating a consistent routine at the end of your day as you're leaving work, so that signals to your mind and your body that it's time to leave, and that the work will stay there on the to-do list and you'll get back to it in the morning. And then the fifth one was delegating and sharing leadership, so critically important. So I want to begin to wind down, and I want to share something that I was thinking about as I was preparing for tonight. And there was a show years ago on NBC, and it was called Parks and Recreation. And that show was one of my favorite shows when it used to, this was years ago, the show was on. And it was shot kind of like in the style of The Office, where there were cameras around and you were, looking at people in the workplace. So there were all these people with such funny and distinct personalities. And one of the episodes that truly was one of my favorites, it was an episode where two of the colleagues did something called Treat Yourself Day. And Treat Yourself Day was where they took off of work. It was the annual day that they did. They took off of work and they spent the day together doing anything that they wanted to do. So they went to the shopping mall. They got their specific lunch at their favorite place. They bought what they wanted for this Treat Yourself Day. And, I was reflecting on that and I thought about it. I had a friend and we did something similar to that. I was in a doctoral program at the time, and she was in a nurse practitioner program. And we knew that there were going to be times when we were very stressed during that school year. So again, we were very intentional with our calendar, but we got together, we synced our calendar, and we said, we're going to take off quarterly. One day a quarter, we took off from our jobs, and we actually went to, it was like a gym or a spa. She had a guest pass, so I went on her guest pass. They had a pool there and a sauna, and we would spend half the day relaxing, and the other half of the time, we stayed there and we worked on our coursework. And it was a wonderful time, and we look forward to that. And the reason why I'm sharing that with you is because I want us to think about ways that we can treat ourselves. That's not, a very expensive vacation or something that's going to break the bank. I think that there are ways that we can incorporate things that we love and things that we find joy in on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a quarterly basis, whatever it is. I want you to think through What's something that you might take off of work even for a half a day? Or what's something that you don't even have to take off work for? What's a decompressing activity you can do when you get home once a week, every day? Maybe walking or something, but what's something that you can commit to doing that you know is going to fill your cup, that you know is going to put you in a good mental space? That's what sustainable leadership is all about. I saw a graphic a couple years ago, and it said something like a breaking point, when you're in a good place, and it was right in the middle. There were 3 points along this line. It was a continuum. And it said the time to take breaks is not when you're at your breaking point. That is too late. When you are at your breaking point, you're already in a bad position. We can't wait that long to take a break. In fact, if we attempt to wait that long till we're at our breaking point, our bodies are going to break for us. Our minds are going to break, and we're not going to have a choice. So the spectrum said you want to take your breaks right in the middle. You want to take your break when you start to feel your body saying, I'm getting a little stressed. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need a break. Because what often happens is we feel that, but we push through. I don't want us to push through this year. I want us to commit to taking breaks right in the middle. When we are at a space when we are feeling, oh my goodness, I'm feeling overwhelmed, that's the time to take the break. That's the ideal time. So I want to leave you with a reflection question as we're thinking. I want you to think about one boundary that you can try to put into place this year. Think about the earlier question. Where did you feel that overwhelm? And then where can you put that boundary in? So I want you to go into the chat and tell me what's one thing you want to try this year. One thing, because this is my belief. You can't do everything. I gave you 5 different strategies, and there are many more in our book, Relational Intelligence, particularly in chapter 9 around boundaries. But when you try to do everything, nothing gets accomplished. So I want you to commit right now one thing. It might be you're going to communicate a boundary this year. It might be you're going to block your calendar off in a different way. It may be you need to say no for the first time and learn to get comfortable with that. It might be that you're going to delegate, or you're going to work on your routine at the end of the day to signal to yourself that it's time to go. Or my favorite, you're going to treat yourself. You're going to take a day, you're going to take an hour, you're going to take 30 minutes. I'll tell you, when I'm thinking about myself for next year, one of the goals I want to work towards is sitting down and eating lunch. We know as teachers and school leaders, eating lunch is not something to take for granted. In fact, over the summertime, I enjoyed my lunches because I had time to do it. And so the goal I am personally setting for myself this year is to actually sit down and eat a lunch. And I know in order to do that, I'm going to have to block off my calendar. I know I have to do that because it's not going to work by a hope and a prayer. It's going to work through intentional planning to make it happen. So I would love to hear what you all are thinking about doing. What's just one boundary you can put into place? And as we have just 1 minute left, I'd like to remind you for the final time to come to order Relational Intelligence, the key factor to exceptional school leadership. Chris, thank you so much. I know you want to delegate. I saw Dr. Matthew here. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming on tonight. If you don't have your copy of Relational Intelligence, please check it out. We know this is going to be a very helpful resource to you. Dr. Johnson and I put our heart and souls into thinking about what are some great strategies that school leaders can use right away. So thank you in advance for picking up your copy today. And we'd love to hear your feedback on how the book was helpful to you or how the book informed your practice. I wish you a wonderful week ahead. The next time we're coming together is going to be September 7th. And our topic is connection over compliance. So I want to see all of you back here at 7 o'clock, September 7th, Strong Start Sundays. Thank you again to Teacher Goals for allowing me to have this amazing platform to share great strategies with amazing leaders and teachers. And thank you to everyone who joined me tonight. I'll see you later.